Wow, it has been a minute since I put out a new video. I want to thank you guys for being patient with me. The past few months, I kind of put this project on pause so that I could focus my creative energy more on stand up comedy. But today, I'm bringing it back with a conversation about stand up comedy. So I hope you guys enjoy it. If you've been following this channel, you'll remember a video I made about Seattle's long running open mic at a venue called the Jai Thai. It was set to close down, and the whole comedy community came together, and we saved it. And the video ended with a happy ending. But I feel like I owe you guys an update, because unfortunately, Jai Thai was only open for about 2 more months after that video came out, before they finally closed their doors for good. The Seattle comedy scene lives on, but it's been a turbulent time. There's a lot of new open mics starting up, and there's a lot of open mics ending. Which leads me to today's guests. For the first time on this show, I invited 2 people to come and talk to me at the same time. My good friends and local Seattle comedians, Dan Berlyn and Banji Oyewole. Both of these guys are super funny, and they just got back from testing their comedy chops out in New York City. So I thought it'd be a good time to chat with them about the differences in the Seattle comedy scene and the New York comedy scene. I hope you guys enjoy this conversation. Let's jump right into it. We're recording.
All right.
Hey, wait, can we stop recording for a second?
Why? What's your dirty secret?
There's a dirty secret. It's fine. No, you're right. Keep recording.
we can trim stuff out, especially from the beginning and end.
Do you promise?
Yeah.
All right.
If there's something specific you want trimmed out.
I don't know if I wanted to trim it. If you said you promise, do you promise?
It's
Sounds-
fine. No,
sounds
it's fine.
good.
Let's begin the...
No, what is it?
There's nothing I'm not saying.
That's not true.
It's definitely not.
It's absolutely true. This is a true podcast.
So then why would you ask him to delete,
Because
stop
I just
recording?
wasn't ready when he pressed the button, you know? There's no fanfare. He didn't make a sound effect like bloop, you know?
I prefer that.
I'd prefer if you
I
made a
prefer,
sound effect.
nope.
You prefer no sound effects?
It's like a gun to start a race. It's like, I don't need that energy right now.
Wow. I think you do need that energy right now.
Thank you guys for coming on my podcast.
Is that the bloop noise?
It's as close as we're gonna get.
Okay.
Thank you for having us, Zach.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Man, so there's a lot of things I want to talk to you guys about. Obviously, you just went to New York, and I want to hear all about that trip. But before we get to that, I think we should introduce you guys a little bit to the audience because they don't know you. I'm gonna do some sort of little intro video, but we're gonna ignore that, and it's gonna be repetitive for the viewers. I'm sorry, but you guys are both comics here in the Seattle comedy scene. Why don't you introduce yourselves and tell the audience how you got into comedy?
Dan?
All right, I'm Dan Berlyn. I did my first set at a place called Jai Thai in Capitol Hill in Seattle about 3 years ago. And I bombed 3 times in a row. And then I didn't do comedy until after the pandemic, because I would have, but the pandemic happened. And then I started again going to this thing called Naked Brunch, which is just a riffing open mic, and it's much easier than actual prepared stand-up. Then they encouraged me to actually do open mics after a few months of that, and I started doing that. I started taking it really seriously in about March of this year, and I've been having a lot of fun since then. So now I'm a producer at Naked Brunch. It's a good atmosphere. The Seattle scene is supportive, and I like that aspect of it. Yeah, so now I've been doing it consistently for over a year now, and yeah, I'm getting stage time at clubs. It's a good time. Made a lot of friends.
Banji?
So I think my first open mic was in 2018 at our friend from university. Her name was Molly, and she hosted this thing called a formal open mic. It was an open Michael. And so I did some minutes there. It was very friendly, very warm room. So, lukewarm jokes will get you pretty far. And I had a lot of fun. And then I did it at this place called Stoneway Cafe. They had a music comedy open mic, and I did it there in 2019 one time, and that also was fun. And that went fine. And then my brother was doing his away rotation for med school, and he was in New York. So he was like, my apartment's gonna be empty for a month, and I want you to stay there because it is too expensive for it to be empty for a month. So I went there and I did comedy in New York, knowing no one, for like 6 weeks, and I got my comedy sea legs really. Then I came back and I hit the Seattle scene pretty hard. I ended up hosting at Jai Tai for a while and have been on a couple shows since then, and it's been good. It's been great.
So both of you guys brought up Jai Tai. The three people who watch all the videos on this channel will know Jai Tai because of the video that you guys were both in. Dan, I know that you didn't love your portrayal in that video.
No, I had one joke, and you didn't even put the whole joke in.
It's true.
You just put the punchline, which is just me repeating the word penis 5 times. Yeah, because the punchline was that I was imitating a Pokemon called Penis Chew. I don't even remember the setup. I think I did that joke 4 times. It did terribly each time, and then I stopped forever. So, yeah, I wish you had picked something else for that. But that was a fun time, though.
It was a good night, and I mean, the hard truth is, unfortunately, that just wasn't your best set.
No, it wasn't.
The room was like on a very specific frequency, and it just like I wanted to have, especially both of you guys in the video, because I'm like, these are like my friends in the comedy scene. But then it was also like, yeah, this was kind of a rough set for Dan.
Oh yeah.
So like that was the quickest laugh I could fit into the video. Basically is I think what went into that decision, but I apologize.
Oh, no need to apologize. Your
Your
logic is sound. I just wish it had gone differently. But yeah, so Jai Tai, I assume that you bring it up because it was a success and you documented it, and then 2 months later it closed down due to health code violations and has been closed since. So
yeah, I feel like I should probably have put some follow-up on this YouTube channel when it closed down, because there were a couple people that went to Jai Tai after they saw my video. So it kept happening. People are like coming to this closed down Thai food restaurant hoping to find an open mic. Just finding someone sleeping outside instead. But how has your guys' perception of like the Seattle comedy scene changed over time? You know, it's gone through a lot of ups and downs, even in the time I've been in it.
I mean, it definitely has reshaped. Jai Tai was like a major part of the week for just regular open micers because it was, good stage time. You could get like actual random people in as audience members, and it was fun because the sets were like 3 minutes. So even if you didn't like someone, if you didn't like someone, there'd be someone new pretty quickly. So it was really, really entertaining, and it was a good hang as well for the comedians in the back and outside. And there's not really been anything to replace it fully that had like this sort of central location and that same energy of just let's go there, it'll be a good time, good stage time. Let me try this one joke quickly. So I don't know. I mean, communities change, times are a changing, and we are continuing to grow. New mics are popping up, so we'll see how it shakes out.
Dan, any thoughts?
yeah, I think that is kind of the point when Jai Tai was threatening to close down. It is kind of a turning point in the open mic scene here because, as Banji said, we don't have anything similar to that now, where both very new and seasoned comics could come in and everyone would be intermingling. That I don't think there's anything similar to that now. So unfortunately, the open mic scene in Seattle, I think, is not as good as it was when I would go and watch people like 3 or 4 years ago. The Comedy Underground closed during the pandemic, and that was another place where people could intermingle with good comics, good crowd. So it's very competitive right now. It's very competitive to get on shows and to get into clubs. And there are a lot of newer people who are energized and they want to do well. But it's a very much of a do-it-yourself kind of scene right now. I think the people who do the best are the ones who produce their own shows, do their own marketing, get their own crowd. So in that way, it's a challenge, but maybe there's opportunity there as well.
So with that, let's get into your recent trip to New York and like in general, how did you view the scene in New York? Like coming from Seattle, what was it like for you?
Yeah.
Dan, it was your first time, right? Going to New York or
Yeah.
going for comedy?
I'd been there once before for a couple of days. Didn't really see much. Didn't really do much. But this time, I was there for a full week. So, uh, without qualifying it, I would say it was a lot better. Everything was better. Um, I didn't get into any places where there was a great crowd, so I can't really compare the crowds. But as far as the competition, um, the people who were committed to comedy, you could tell it was just stronger across the board. Everybody, there weren't many people I saw who had terrible sets, or you could tell that they just hadn't been doing it long. It was competitive. It was fun. People went harder. People were looser. So that's what I observed.
Banji?
Yeah, it was very interesting to see. It's a much bigger scene, of course. It's like a central point of comedy in the United States. So a lot of people go there, like the best in their hometown will go to New York. And yeah, the sort of the level of quality, the median level of quality of like the comedian's stage presence and jokes was higher than it is here. Um, which isn't to say that Seattle comics are worse. It's just that people are starting here, and people they've been started when they go to New York. And then I'd also say that there were sort of two scenes. There was like the Manhattan scene and the Brooklyn scene. And the Brooklyn scene was closer to the energy of the like sort of Seattle scene, which is like very friendly and like everybody at the mics that you go to. And I got that sensation with just like hanging out with people after the mics as we got the opportunity to do. And then Manhattan it felt more like get in, tell your jokes, get out. And these are probably comedians who were like on shows or like bigger, and they just need this stage time in the rooms where they like will be having shows soon and stuff like that. So that was interesting to see.
When you guys were figuring out where to go, how did you find mics? And did you like try to get in anywhere where you didn't get in, or did you like all go like just aim for places that you knew you'd be able to get in? Like, what was your strategy?
So there were some comics from New York in the Seattle International Comedy Competition who were here a couple of weeks ago for the finals of that competition, and I talked to a couple of them, and one of them put me onto this Facebook group called New York City Indoor or Outdoor Indoor Open Mics, I think, or comedy, something like that. And there were a lot of posts about mics happening every day. There were lists, there were places where you'd show up, go up. We went to places where they were either on Banji's list from the last time he went to New York, or they were posted about in the last day or two on that Facebook group. So we had a pretty good idea. We did end up going to mics that hadn't been going for a while, and that happened like 3 or 4 times. So there were 3 or 4 times where we just went somewhere and there was no one, or there was a show going on. They're like, yeah, we don't do that mic anymore. But the good news was that there was usually somewhere else to go, even when that happened. The next mic was usually only an hour away at any given point during the week. So we got to hit a lot, and I don't think we went someplace where we just hadn't gotten there in time to get on the main list. So we just ended up talking to some people who pointed us in another direction, and that happened a couple times. So people were willing to tell us where to go. We would show up at these mics, and then people would tell us other places during the week where they go. So we found a lot of places like that.
Were there any times when you felt like the audiences were different, or you had to like change your jokes to be more New Yorky? Like this joke's too Seattle to work here.
Seems like a really pointed question, Zach. I feel like you're attacking us right now because you got wind of a mic that we went to where we didn't do particularly well with our
Want to
Seattle
just talk
jokes.
about that?
No, I don't want to talk about that. It was one mic. We went to like 14 mics in 7 days. And at one mic, it didn't go well. So we should focus on that.
I feel like we have to now.
Right, so tell me about the mic that didn't go well.
I don't have anything else to say about it, Dan.
All right, so we went to one mic in Harlem, and yeah, we Banji and I pretty much bombed. It was very much a black room, and you know, they saw me as a white dude. I don't know what else to say about it. And
You?
yeah, me. And apparently they saw Banji as a white dude too,
No,
because he did
there
not
were-
do well.
There were extenuating circumstances.
There were extenuating
to you not doing
circumstances. Yeah.
Was that the hardest room?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It was a very fun room though. Like if you got them, you would have had the time of your life because they were ready for what they were ready for, and they would have been very happy to have had it. And we saw people, you know, absolutely do monstrously well in that room, but it wasn't us, you know.
Yeah. No, they just wanted a stiffer drink of comedy. If that makes sense. They wanted you know, animation and harder jokes, and they had this bell system, which you know is completely subjective. But one or two people had these bells, and they would ring it whenever a joke did well, which I thought I should have gotten more bells. But the point is, Banji got 3 bells.
Why are you saying
and
the number
I
of
got
bells that people are getting?
4 bells.
How is this helpful to me?
And Max Nelson got 10 bells. So Max did better than Banji and I did combined.
Well, they must have liked Max, huh?
I mean, that would be a strong word, but they liked him better than us.
I would like to reflect upon the points of extenuating circumstances that I experienced.
Sure.
Great.
Let us in on what those were.
Okay. So you have your open mic list, right? It's just you got numbers down the side and you got names next to the numbers. And so I sign up for number 3. A guy signs up for number 2, not realizing that if there's no one at number 1, he will be number 1. So the host warms up the room, quick little 5-minute set, lays down some ground rules, and then he brings up this first guy. And the first guy very slowly meanders towards the microphone and says, "I don't want to go up," to the host, and goes back to sit down. The host is like, "What? You're first on the list. Why is your name first if you're not trying to go first?" He was like, "I didn't know I'd be first. I don't want to go right now." And then so they have this like argument across the room where this guy is just like sitting down even though he should be on stage. And then the host is like, "Well, now I have to reheat the room like a soggy 3 a.m. burrito." And he tells like a lukewarm joke that he was not prepared to tell. And he brings me up. And it's my first time up in this room. And it feels like there's nothing I can do to recover the audience. And I'll admit that I started with a joke that was like way too heady. And I didn't know this because it was also my first time in the room. So I didn't get to like change my set to not pander, but to match the space that I was in, you know. And so those are my extenuating circumstances.
Well, I mean, still sounds like fun.
I learned something, I think.
Yeah. What did you learn?
Don't go first.
Don't go first.
That guy was right
Yeah.
to run away from being
Did
first.
he go on later?
He did, and he did worse than Dan and I did.
What he gets.
I suppose.
So did you guys like come back and be like, "Man, I have to go live in New York"? Like,
It's definitely in my head. I do want to see other comedy cities before I make a decision like that. But yeah, I mean, if I wanted to get better faster, I think that would be one way to do it. And it just seems like there are a lot of things about the city that are appealing to me personally. But I have reasons that I have to stay in Seattle for a while, I think. So it's not that I couldn't move. It's just that there are a couple convenience things for me right now. But yeah, I definitely, like, as far as comedy goes, I don't think you can beat New York City. We were able to just go to places. It moves much faster. You can get more stage time if you want to. And it's just more comedy centric, and you can take more risks. That's how I felt anyway. So yeah, it definitely has its appeal there.
Were you guys just taking the subway when you're there to get around mostly?
Mostly.
Did you like try to plan it out where like if you're like going into Manhattan, you try to hit multiple Manhattan mics, or were you just going all over the place?
Yeah, I mean, we'd try to space it out. But ultimately everything was within range of the other ones. There were only a couple times where we had to rule something out because it was too far.
Were there any like big cultural differences in the comedian sphere between how like what you see there and what you see here?
Dan?
Okay. Yeah, there were. There very much were. People in general seemed looser. I heard a lot more bad words that people get in trouble for saying here. R bombs, whatever. And so I think people just had a better sense of humor um, as far as the things they were willing to hear. It seems big enough to where, yes, there are clicks, but it also seems like, um, you know, you can be a little bit more anonymous. I think that has its pros and cons. Um, and, it just seemed like people were a little more focused. Uh, that's my first impression.
Banji, anything you want to add?
Um, I guess I would say that yeah, I think there's a different sense of humor in New York from Seattle. I don't think it's better or worse. It's just
I think it's better. I think it's better.
I think yeah, we're allowed to have different culture on opposite sides of an enormous country, and I think that that's okay. Um, and I'd say that the scene. Well, and going back to your earlier question, actually about like being in New York and choosing to go there, I think the open mic scene is objectively better. Like, I mean, who could even argue? But there's this like artificial ceiling where you need to like when you're getting on shows, when you're first getting on shows, they're called bringer shows. You need like 5 friends, and like for someone who just like bummed their way into the city, it's not easy to find 5 people to go to a show and pay $20 for the show, just so you can get stage time. And so that's like another barrier to like getting big there versus if you, and I say this in the weirdest way, so don't hold me to this language, but like if you collect your comedy clout somewhere else and you bring it with you to New York, there's a lot of nonsense that you can just get around. Like, so if you were like already had your followers, your sets, your proof that you're funny, getting onto a show would be without those burdens of you need to bring these people because they know you're good, and it's not like they need the room to be friendlier for you by having 5 of your friends in there for it to be a fun show for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would ditto that sentiment. But to go back to your question about the culture, I mean, our first night or second night, we went to this place called Revisions, and they had something called a heckle mic, which I think they do at Tacoma Comedy Club occasionally. But the format was basically someone would go up, and for their whole set, people are just like attacking them verbally, like with the meanest things they can think of, or the quickest things. And I mean, the things that I heard in there, like people would get banned from the scene if we said that sort of thing here. And that that was very exciting in that way, because I don't know, it's like when you're a kid and you see porn for the first time, you look around and you're like, oh my god, I can just do this when no one else is around. Like, that's how it felt. Like, it just seemed like or like the first time when I watched South Park as a kid, I was like, oh my god, you can say that, and other people think it's funny. Like, that is what I learned there, and that's what I kind of had wanted to see.
Wild. That was a wild evening. Because there was a regular open mic in the room just before, and then a new host came in and used the same space to do the heckle mic. And I wouldn't even call it a heckle mic so much as it was a comedian would go on stage and just bear insults about every part of their personhood for like 5 minutes. And nothing was off limits effectively. I was sitting in the back of the room aghast because I didn't know what was about to happen, but it was, I mean, to call it any single bad thing would be wrong because it's their culture, but it was racist and it was like sexist and it was like fashion. It was everything you could say about
Anything
Berlin.
ist or phobic, it was on the table.
Yeah, and everybody was cool with it. And I saw, because I didn't know, so girl walks on stage and they just come after her fit, her hair, her weight, and she comes to the back of the room where she was sitting, like very close to me, and she's fine. And I was like, what? Like I feel like I would have had some sort of personal crisis if I were on that stage because I didn't know it was going to happen. But apparently she walked in and was like, I need this. This is like some sort of therapy by being, I don't know, stabbed for everyone who went on stage that night.
Wild. So you guys didn't go up on stage for the...
No, it was a pretty limited list that night because there was a private event that the space had rented for like a few minutes. It really only went on for half an hour, so we couldn't get on. But I threw a few heckles out, and I guess they didn't hear me very well. I didn't realize that till later, but it was fun. It was fun. It was a low inhibition kind of thing, and I learned, or I just heard from some of the people there, that the benefit to that is, you got to be really quick to come back, because there were people who were shouting back comebacks on stage, and there were some people who were just frozen. So that's one area where I guess you could learn that. It's like it's way worse than it would ever be probably in real life as far as just a number of people shouting at you, but I guess you could learn something from that. And then also you learn what people's first impression of you is, which is crucial when you're a performer, especially a comedian. So I think that is important. So that's what I got out of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were like 3 open mics that, like, if I could have extended my trip for the express purpose of doing those mics, I'd probably try to do that mic. The mic that we also did in Harlem, the Harlem Nights mic, I definitely want to do that again. I think we learned a lot from our first experience there. And then there also was this thing called an efficiency mic, and that was a wild concept. It effectively says everybody shows up, you're going to get an hour divided by the number of comedians who show up, and it worked out to be like 54 seconds per comedian. And then there was a button you could press to gamble to get either an additional 30 seconds or lose 30 seconds. And yeah, it was just so much fun. It felt like an event that I feel like audiences could love, but it was just comedians because it was so full.
Was the button random, or was the button determined by something?
It was a software bound button, so they may have had like numbers in the background,
Sure.
but to the audience it was random.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was good because it kept everybody engaged, right? You only have a minute. You're not going to be bored in the minute probably if you're an audience member. I pressed the button, but I went toward the end, and people were doing it a lot in the beginning, and they were cheering when people got more time and be like, oh, when people got less time. But when I did it, I got more time. And I didn't realize this when I was up there, but watching the video of it, there was like a soft groan. They're like, oh, so I don't regret it. I just didn't have 100, or not 100. I didn't have 1 minute and 20 seconds worth of material ready, because I was going through everything so fast. So I ended up doing crowd work. So it compresses everything, and that makes it kind of fun. But it's also not a very good gauge for how your material or your stage presence actually is, because it's so different when you only have a minute or less.
If the mic with the bells was the low point, was there like a best mic that you guys were like, wow, I killed it at that one?
I don't think I had one overall great set. The circumstances were that there were either a bad room or not a bad room. It was like all comics, and it might have been that you know, it was a little lower energy. I was trying new material all week, so I didn't expect to kill anywhere, because they were all open mics. But I enjoyed a set at St. Mark's Comedy Club. That was an actual club with a nice background. There was some audience members who were not comedians. I think that might have been the only one where there were a significant number of non-comedians in the crowd. And there was one which was all comedians except for like one person brought her friend. That was I can't remember the name of it.
It was the producer's room.
The producer's room?
Yeah.
Okay. So it was like a tucked away little theater. And it just ended up being really loose, and we were saying wild things to each other. I abandoned my material 3 minutes into my set, and then did much better from there, doing crowd work. So that was fun. It also reminded me that if a set is going horribly, sometimes you just need to abandon it. Like, and that I haven't done that in a while, so that felt good to reuse that skill.
Banji, any highlights on your side?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I think overall I did pretty well in the rooms that we did. I was also trying new stuff. I wrote, I'd say, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes of new material while we were in New York, which was really cool. Yeah, I had a lot of fun doing these mics, and a lot of fun finding new notes in jokes that I hadn't tried before. It's just nice because, it was Dan, myself, and Max, and we were all holding like a microscope to our jokes that week. We watched our tapes, and we evaluated what we were doing right and what we were doing wrong, new things to try. And so I think being in New York and having like fresh ears for all of your jokes was a really valuable experience for us, in terms of just like sharpening them.
Totally. So what were the venues that these open mics were at for the most part? Like, were they bars? Were they clubs? Were they, you said, the ones at theater? What types of rooms are we talking?
There were a little of each. Some of the bars had a stage. There were a few clubs we went to. It was interesting seeing the clubs because around here in Seattle and Tacoma, if it's a club, then it's got a good audience. Like everything there, even if it's during the week, it's gonna have a crowd, and it will have an energy like it's important. But there, like we did a mic that started at 12:30 in the morning in Brooklyn at I believe it's called the Brooklyn Comedy Club, and it just had this energy of just being like a late night slosh fest. Like there was one completely drunk dude who was heckling, and it took Banji's entire set and then some for them to throw him out. Like they just didn't have anyone on staff whose job it was to throw people out. Like they had a security guard, but she couldn't do it. So yeah, it was a little more of a free-for-all in that sense, even though it was a club, whereas some of the bars had a more polished feel to it. So yeah, I think in that environment, yeah.
It's like here, it definitely is the opposite, where the clubs are like where you want to be, but all the bars are kind of empty, and like that's interesting you say that.
Well, yeah, and I guess the point there is that it didn't matter quite so much the venue as the time and probably the promotion and the people involved.
Were there any like big lessons or takeaways that you felt like you brought back to Seattle? You're like, now this is what I'm gonna do moving forward.
I think it gave me a little bit more confidence, because I know that there are other places that even if my joke doesn't do well here or my style isn't well received, that there are other places for it. Like, it doesn't seem so big now here, and it makes me wonder what other places I could go. So that was one thing I took away. I don't think there's any like, mechanical or joke structure new thing. I mean, I think that's the same pretty much anywhere. It's just the attitude. The attitudes were different. People took bigger risks there, and now I think I feel like I could do the same. Whereas I think for a while I've felt a little bit restricted. Like I have to really limit and curate my sets, which is, it's definitely true. If you want to do well, you have to curate your set and your style for the audience. But it just seems like there are other ways to do it. You can go big in some places, whereas, I mean, the jokes that really did well there, like there are like half the rooms in Seattle where I don't think they do well at all here.
Interesting. And you think just because like Seattle's a little more like sensitive about like
Yeah,
touchy
absolutely,
subjects?
absolutely. There's no way around it. I'm not like I'm not saying that's a bad thing or it shouldn't be that way, but that's how it is here, and so you have to be very aware of that. And I think it's good to do rooms where that's the case. It's good to do a diverse set of areas where one style will do well and it won't do well somewhere else. And I think that just makes you better as a performer, as a writer, being a little more diverse in your approach. And but being from Seattle in the last year, it was interesting. It was eye-opening to see the other side of it, like where there are much fewer limits. It wasn't that everything that was crass or mean in its nature did well. You still had to be good, right? And so, but I was able to see on an open mic level how people did that.
Banji, you have a take on that?
I don't want to be particularly meta, but you're able to edit this, right?
I usually leave them unedited. So if there's something you really don't want in there, we can do something. But I usually let them just be how they are.
Okay. Well, I don't want to
I can add a big beep sounds if there's something you don't want, some information you don't want out there.
it's a podcast. You're gonna have that, I imagine. But it's like a podcast, and I don't want to put on the record any crimes that we committed in New York or anything like that.
Say allegedly.
Okay, allegedly, Dan said at the producer's mic, the producer's room, he stopped telling his jokes 3 minutes in, and then made a racist comment to another comedian in the room, which was a joke, and it was funny. Okay, it was funny. And then that comedian clapped back at him, which was also very funny. But I'm just saying, like, is that better than Seattle, where you just can't say racist things to people? I don't know.
I mean, I think you can do that here in certain rooms if the energy is right for it.
Sure. But I would go further.
I didn't say anything crazy.
No, what you said was way less racist than what the last guy said.
No, yeah. So it's, you still have to deliver stuff in a comedic way. I didn't attack someone. It was it was just a subtle comment on race. And his job, which. But he got me back when he had the microphone, and I think that's how it ought to be when, if you're gonna make a dig at someone, they should have the opportunity to respond in kind.
Yeah, I would.
And
I
he
would
did,
say,
and we both enjoyed it, I think.
you
And
think?
and the room did too.
Yeah, I think the room had a lot of fun that evening. I would say you have to ask yourself: do you want a scene where you can say racist things, people clap back at you, or you want a scene where people don't do that? And that's a question you should ask. Everyone should ask themselves.
Right. And again, I don't think it's worse, but if you do that here, you might get called out on Facebook, or you know, you get complaints to the host or the venue,
Sure.
and that makes me sad.
But I would go further and say that there was just like a weird sadness among the New York white male comedians, because you could go to a room in Brooklyn and each of them would have a joke about suicide. Just like real casual, like it wasn't even like, oh, this is my bit, I own this. They just like have one joke that they throw in about their deep, unending sadness. And I think Dan felt more comfortable about telling his jokes about his deep, unending sadness
Right.
with all of his friends in New York.
Yeah, it was just the same thing, and I don't think that joke did really well anywhere. So I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh yeah, like suicide jokes are the shit and we should do them in Seattle. I mean, some people do. It's just, yeah, tough subjects aren't as well received in a higher percentage of the places here.
Yes, and I think that that statement is something I can agree with, but the wild statements you were making earlier about how it was open season for any type of humor in New York, it's just not true. I think you still need to be good in the
that's what
same
I
way
said.
that you can do it if you're good in Seattle, but like you won't get banned if you're just bad either. Like I said, at the same producer's room, Mike, where Dan made a very mild racist comment, a man at the end made a very racist comment, and then the host just clapped back at him for doing that. And that's not necessarily how it would go in Seattle. I think he may have been like kicked off the stage or something like that, but like one should not romanticize the freedoms of New York without saying that there are rules and a different way of handling it. And maybe that's better than it is in Seattle for people's specific types of humor, but it's not like it's not open season.
So for you and your preference, how did you feel about that? Like, do you like Seattle being a little tighter about like monitoring that kind of stuff, or do you like having a place like New York where it's more, Wild West?
Yeah, I personally don't have a preference. I just recognize that it's okay that they're different. Like, it is okay that Seattle doesn't find that genre of quick, crass humor as funny as maybe New York does. I would go on to say that there's like, in New York, you can tell jokes about like things that are their own. Like, they have a large Jewish population, so there are more jokes about that. And then there are also more jokes about, September 11th. Like, that is a thing that they joke about openly there that other parts of the country don't touch. So it's just, they have their culture, we have our culture, and I think there's value to both of them.
Oh, that makes sense. Line and comedy, always an interesting discussion. Do you think that it kind of has to do with what you were saying earlier? You were talking about how when people go to New York, they tend to have a little more experience under their belt. And like when it comes to edgy humor, what I see a lot, at least here in Seattle, is like people use the edge as an excuse to not like have a real joke sometimes. Like sometimes people like have the fact that it's a upsetting statement. That's what's funny about it. But do you think that like New York, there's like a little more sense of like if you're gonna say the edgy joke, like make sure it had the joke part too, or would you say that was?
I think there are two parts to that answer for that question. The first one is that if you have a good joke and it's edgier or even possibly punching down, as that's a common phrase in comedy, but people really like it here. But if it's still funny, then people will laugh. I think there are good jokes that some people perceive as punching down in this scene, where even if it may be delivered well or written well, then they don't give themselves permission to find it funny. The other side of that is that if it's edgy and bad, you're just going to get called out for being edgy and bad, and that is the consequence. Whereas here, if you're both edgy and bad, you're probably gonna not get asked to not come back depending on the room. Or if if it's a place where that stuff is accepted, then that room is going to get a reputation as an edgelord or mean room. Whereas it just might be that a few people do that on any given day. So I think that it's, the key there is that it seemed more okay to take risks. And if it paid off, great. And if it didn't, then, you said something stupid and wrong. And maybe people recognize that. But there's the opportunity to try it, even if it's both just not funny and offensive.
Was there anything like in your time in New York in the comedy scene that you were like, we should be doing this here, or like this is a thing that should be happening in Seattle?
I like the heckle mic. Yeah.
Maybe we should throw one.
Yeah. It just seemed like it's a sort of thing because I don't know. I'm sure that there are feuds and disagreements and grudges in the New York scene. It probably gets diluted because there's so many more people. That would be my guess. But here, there are a lot of petty feuds and grudges, and it just seemed like the place where people could air it out. I don't know. It seemed like maybe they were all friends. I don't think they were doing it in a mean-spirited way, but maybe, I don't know, but maybe some of these hurt feelings, and I don't know if it's a chicken or egg situation, like the scene is more sensitive so we can't do it, or we don't have things like this so people get tighter, but it just seemed like that's the sort of thing where you could air out whatever it is you felt about another person on first glance. And then you moved on. You just got it out of your system.
What do you think, Banji? You seem like maybe you disagree.
This is one of those culture things where it's like that can be their thing. I don't know that it would work amazingly well here. This is so heady, but it's like going back to what we discussed before. It's like in Seattle, sometimes hosts and rooms are expected to sort of editorialize or curate the content, but you can't really do that because the comedians obviously have full creative control, as they very well should. And so with that expectation, you might in Seattle have spaces where you set up a heckle mic that is as wild as daring as this, but you can't editorialize it. Or maybe you'll try and you'll be like, you can say all of this stuff, but you can't make racist jokes. You could say all this stuff, but you can't make sexist jokes. And that's sort of antithetical to the mission of a room like this. And so I'm not sure that Seattle is the right place for that at this exact time. It is a cool concept and you do learn a lot. It is of value, but I'm not sure that it's right for Seattle at this time.
I know they do it in Tacoma. I saw one that happened like last week. I don't know if it's the exact same or.
Well, if you saw, you didn't see the show.
I didn't see the show. I just saw somebody talking about it. So the concept is something that transfers, at least to Tacoma. I don't know if it's as quick and sharp as the one that we saw, but it's not, roast, and it's something that has been around here for a while.
I mean, I would literally say that, Mitch Schaub runs a heckle mic. Mm-hmm. That, like, if Seattle was New York, it would look exactly like that room.
Right. The problem is
cannot get a single joke in because the audience is coming after them with everything they've got, and the comedians can snap back at the. But like I said, different culture, so it doesn't shake out that way. Like the exact same space has been set up, and the culture is different, so the results are different.
Right, at the last Apollo show, I mean, the point is not per se to heckle the comedians, it's just that it's allowed. But the last time, I mean, Mitch was like begging them to heckle, and they wouldn't, or even boo, and for the most part, they didn't.
So yeah, it's just culture. And I'm sure there are unique experiences to Seattle open mic comedy that we can't speak to because we've lived with it. I'm in New York. I'm sorry, that's probably not true. The Seattle comedy scene is very nice, of course, but it's not like this is some sort of cool central place in comedy in America. It is a nice scene with good people. It's fun to be here. Um, but yeah, I don't think we can have everything that New York has.
While we're talking about the different scenes, Benji, you've also done a couple nights in LA.
Yeah.
Any comments on like how that compares to the New York, Seattle, the different scenes in different cities?
Um, I'd say that New York is like both Seattle and LA in that you can find, excuse me, in that you can find comedians who are just like, I need to get the stage time so I can do my show later. Like I just need to hit an open mic before I perform for people for money. And then you can also find people who are still honing their craft, who are like, I'm hitting mics, trying new jokes. This isn't just a warm up. This is me. Literally, I'm writing right now. And I think in LA, there was a lot of people who were just like, yeah, I just gotta say this into a microphone and I'm leaving. Like, I'm not a part of the culture. I gotta go. And then in Seattle, there's a lot of people who like to come, hang out, talk to the comedians, engage with the community. So New York has both of them. New York has effectively everything.
New York's the place.
And there could be other places, I don't know, but New York is one of the places, certainly.
Well, now that you guys are back here in Seattle, what's the plan moving forward? What's next in the comedy mission?
Well, I've got some personal things I got to lock down, like where I'm gonna live, but I'd like to put myself forward for more shows. Eventually, I'm still trying to get more involved in clubs as much as I can. Um, it may be time to start uh, grouping people and seeing if we can put on a show somewhere. Because, like I said earlier, it's very much a do-it-yourself scene here, and taking more risks in that way. Because, yeah, it's gonna suck if we put on shows and no one goes to them or no one buys tickets, which does happen. Happens quite frequently around here, and I imagine other places. But I think it's a necessary thing to do. When people aren't just handing out stage time to you for whatever reason. So that could be the next move. As far as comedy goes, I feel a little refreshed as far as, feeling more fluid in writing jokes. I was in a pretty bad slump for a while there. And having passed the year mark, I think it's time to really look at my stuff and be like, okay, I have a few jokes that consistently do well, but eventually I'm going to have to cut those or taper those out so that I can change and try new things, try a different style, and try a different approach with the crowd. So I think that'll be a necessary step too.
Banji?
New York was very, very interesting. Yeah, it's sort of just raises the bar for comedy. Like there's you can have like a mediocre joke in Seattle and it's fine, but like in New York, that there's no room for that anymore. They should all be good. And I think it would be nice if we brought that rigor back with us, so holding ourselves to a higher standard, even though we don't need it while we're here. I would also say that, yeah, the next steps, and I wrote this a while ago, was that the next minute in comedy for me was not you need to write more jokes. It is you need to be like building an audience and like attempting to get on shows and like auditioning for things. Like at some point you have reached a level of quality where the work in this comedy game, as I sometimes call it, is not just being good at your craft. It is all the other parts of being like a sole proprietor of a business that is you who wants to find an audience and engage with that audience and sell tickets at book shows. So I think more of that work is just what needs to be done at this point for me.
In terms of like the big picture of comedy, are you guys like, I'd like to one day hit the road and be a road comic, or are you like, I'd like to just like find a good rhythm in New York or in Seattle, or like in a place, or are you like, I just want a Netflix special? Like, do you have big, like, in terms of long-term goals, what are you looking to get out of comedy?
I think as someone who started comedy later than most people who are going to turn it into a career, um, if I wanted to succeed faster, the way to do that would be to build my own brand and get my own followers. Because I've heard both sides of the argument, right? You've got to, it takes time, you've got to hit the road, you've got to worry about getting good before anything else. And I think there is a lot of merit to that argument. And I probably leaned that way at one point. But as somebody who doesn't necessarily have that time, and I've seen people who are able to get a more focused audience, I mean, there's no downside to it. The only downside that you could perceive is that you're not as diverse of a comedian as you could be. You might be a little lazier or get more comfortable if, you know, you succeed with this narrow audience that you have, which would still need to be a lot of people to really take off. But like, just, you know, looking in the medium range, I think that would objectively be better for me. It's also going to be harder, I think, because I see myself as someone who tries a lot of rooms and tries to be diverse in my approach, and I'm still honing my craft. But the people that I've seen, and maybe this is just a newer thing, is that you have to use the internet and different social media platforms and find your audience that way. And I think that clearly that is the faster way to do it. So that would be the fastest way to make it a career, if you're going to be serious about it in this day and age. And yeah.
So that's what you're looking at. That's your game plan as of right now.
Well, it's kind of like I'm looking at it, and I see that for me, it's going to be hard, right? It's I see myself as more of a grit and grind personality than as someone who, you know, lights up a social media page and grabs your attention quickly. And so I think that's going to be, if I am going to do that, it's going to be a pretty big change in my approach. So in that way, it's kind of intimidating. And, you know, you're putting yourself out there to more people faster, right? So you might not be as good as you're going to be. You might not be everybody's favorite, or you might face criticism. So that's more intimidating. But I think for me, like, that would probably be, you know, it's riskier, but it's also probably a better outcome if you can do it.
Banji, what about you? What's your big picture look at comedy?
I think of like stand-up comedy as like the id of being like a funny, humorous internet personality. So I don't know that this is like the end goal. Like, there could be other mediums, like we could do sketch that could be really funny, and that could be like our new main thing. Or you could just take the skills that you learned from this and like go work on a television show. So I'm not so solidly defined in like what the end goal is. The path to get to these places is approximately the same at this stage. Just keep doing the work, keep trying new things, and put it out there for the world to see and engage with. But knowing that the doors are still open is comforting, but the work is still the same right now, which is just do more stuff, get it out there.
It's a very practical way of looking at it. Well, I feel like we covered a lot of stuff. Is there anything you guys feel like we should have talked about that we missed? Any last thoughts?
Just as someone who hasn't been to New York before, I really liked being able to get a good hot sandwich at 3 a.m. anywhere you are. And I think that can grate on you also, because we do comedy pretty late. And then, you know, you go outside and the world is kind of shut off.
You can only have Dick's so many nights a week.
Yeah, right. Dick's Burgers. For those
international audience.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it just seems more set up. You know, I don't have a car. Most people there don't have a car. You can use a subway system. You can hit more places that way. I think is just more set up for success in that way. But you know, Seattle, I still have a special place in my heart for this place. It was very approachable. It has been very supportive, and I don't think you're going to get that in a lot of places that comedy exists. And I've met the best group, like overall people. You know, I've had closer friends than when I lived here, but as far as the number of people you can interact with, it's been very positive overall. So I really appreciate that, and I hope there's a lot more to do here, because I do still need to get better if I'm going to be serious about this comedy thing. I think this is a good place to launch.
There's one thing for Seattle is a good place to just work out those muscles, you know, without as much competition. It sounds
Right.
like. Banji, any final thoughts?
Free Max Nelson.
Free Max Nelson.
Awesome. Do you guys want to plug your Instagrams or anything? Dan?
Yeah, I'm at Dan Berlyn Comedy. Dan Berlyn with a Y instead of an I, comedy. And yeah, that's really the only social media that I even have enough followers to plug.
So I need.
Yeah.
Banji, are you going to wait till you make a
Comedy
account to plug it?
No, it's fine. My Instagram is Banji Oyewole, BanjiOyewole. There are no jokes there, but there will be soon. Come for the aesthetics, stay for the comedy, I always say.
Love it. Cool. Well, thanks for doing this, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. This
All
has
right.
been great.
All right. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Dan and Banji. I know that some of the audio was a little weird and echoey, and I apologize. I am actively working on improving the audio quality, but getting back into the rhythm of it was the most important thing after a few months of not doing it. My whole mindset with this project is to not let those technical shortcomings stop me from making stuff. So I did the thing. I'm going to keep doing more things. So if you liked it, comment, subscribe, and I'll have more coming down the line for you. Thanks for watching. Till next time.